Destin. How's it going today?
Hey, going good. How are you, Megan?
I am pretty great. Very happy to have you on my podcast. Excited to hear about your business and what you're up to. And I know we've chatted in the past, and I love what you do for clients and businesses, and excited to share it to the world and also hear a bit about how you got there and your story. So let's start at number one. Tell me a bit about your business. What do you do?
I am a psycho-spiritual coach. I actually, you know what? There is intro that I wrote for speaking networking events that I'm just going to read off with a paper.
Away you go.
I am a writer, speaker, and psycho-spiritual coach. I teach world-class visionaries the metaphysics of life and business because everything you do for yourself reflects in your business. The foundations of what I speak on are rooted in both the archetypal psychology inspired by Carl Jung, very deep, and in Judeo-Christian mysticism to help my listeners become a source of order.
I love that. Mic check. That's it. That's what we got. And for the whole archetypes, I know a bit about it, but for someone who doesn't know, kind of getting to know your inner depth, tell me a bit more about that. What do people have in store if they come work with you?
Great questions. Just an observation level, not including spiritual bias or anything. There are 4 primary paths of psychological development. There are a gazillion different archetypes in the world. There's like archetype of the trickster, of the father, initiation, or apocalypse, and stuff like that everyone can relate to on some level. They have a hunch that that's a repeatable human experience. Stuff like that. So that's an archetype. And what makes an archetype is that it has energy, is that we get energy from it. So it can also be very possessive. Because it's so powerful, we get swept away in not understanding it. We get very ignorant and it becomes very controlling. It's not fun. And if we also don't have a relationship with it, we don't get it. So we have to have relationships with it, and they have to be conscious and awake relationships. They have to be mindful. So that being said, I explain it like being in a healthy orbit around a star. You could either be burning up or totally frozen. With all of that being how you interface with archetypes, there are 4 primary archetypes, 4 paths of development in the cycle. There's the sovereign. So if you're a woman, that's a queen. If you're a man, that's a king. There's the warrior. I don't even need to explain much of that. There's the magician or the priest. I've found that my Christian audience and even my family don't like the word magician because they think that's a sorcerer. No, it's just the scholar, the scribe, the surgeon. He has all of these different traits. The shaman. He's the healer, the transformer. And there's the lover is the 4th one. The lover it's not just about intimacy. It's about that's where your inner child, most of that lives. It's a childlike wonder, appreciation. Artists, rock stars, poets, all of that musical, just the beauty of life. That's in the lover space. So it's also really cool that the warrior on the left hand, or I don't know if the video is mirrored or not. The warrior on the left hand is opposite the lover on the right, and they check each other out. It's like checks and balances. If you have too much warrior energy, you need to learn how to appreciate stuff. And the lover is the right hand because the right hand is favored. The left hand is uncomfortable but necessary for most people, if you're a right. The magician energy is deep. It's your past, digging deep into your unconscious. It's the dark stuff. The future is forward, so we look up. The future and vision and ambition is that of the sovereign. The magician and the sovereign check each other out, and if you have too much of either, you need to balance it out with the other.
Okay. And when you get all of these different patterns and I mean, I guess some of it's inherent in like who, I guess the kind of Capricorn and the zodiacs and all those things. There's potentially some that are more inherent that you were born with, and then there's some that you can play with and shift and kind of are more fluid. What does knowing kind of your more solid one and then what you have to work on and what your weaknesses are, what are your ways to kind of figure that out about someone? Is it more about talking to them? I know you did a bit of that with me last time we talked, that you were like, oh, you said this. Oh, that's your pattern. That means that this equals this. Is that your primary way of, I don't want to say categorizing, but helping them know their inner depths? Or is there more a like Myers-Briggs online form to fill out to narrow that down?
So that is actually what my podcast is about, explaining the differences and distinctions and stuff. There is a whole map that I love to illustrate of our personal, like our individuality being like a small circle. It's like a machine, like a clockwork, where everything inside it is gray and mostly lifeless. It is just a machine. We're at the very center point, like the filament in the center of a light bulb, but we're the light, not the filament, because the filament is still there when the light goes out. So that is our personality. And it's all of this clockwork and gears of our self-image and our experiences throughout life that add up to what has automated our personality, our preferences, our beliefs, our viewpoints, whatever. That space from the center point where we truly us are our experience, the more we experience, the more we get saved up and the bigger our personality becomes, which is actually a wall and a barrier around the ocean. If this is an island, the ocean around us is where we get the light from and the color of light. That's outside of our personal space. We have to learn to tune into that. So, and the ocean gives all islands access to it equally. So the bigger your island is, the bigger your personality is, the bigger the problem. And the archetypes, the whole world of the archetypal stuff, because it's all stuff we have access to, we tend to prefer having a relationship with certain archetypes, like mine and magician, because I'm a nerd over this stuff. But like someone who, if you are extroverted and say you are very action taker, but you're also very disciplined, clearly your favorite archetype relationship, because it's not that you are one. Everyone has access to all of these. So it's a relationship always. It's an act of ignorance for a planet to turn toward the sun and be like, hey, I'm a whole star. Like that's not, no. The star looks at the planet and it's like, sit down, shut up. You're not. You need to humble yourself. The more you think you're me, the more arrogant you are, and the more. So our task is, again, it's that healthy orbit. And those archetypes are the stars. When we find a healthy orbit with each of those, we'll notice that we start picking up those traits. And for someone whose favorite is the warrior, they will be on top of stuff. They'll be okay with resting. Not just if they're, you can be very well developed and be a total workaholic in the warrior. That's not healthy. You need to include appreciation and rest with the lever. That's healthy because it's not so blown up. Carl Jung calls that inflation. And when you don't have enough of that, it's not deflation, it's negative inflation because you're full of yourself and you say, only I'm this bad. Only I'm the problem. I'm a bird. I'm so special. And you don't realize that you're also being arrogant because you're saying that you're the only problem. Like it's a negative arrogance, but you know how that. So when it comes to, yeah, absolutely, personality leads to getting huge chance on being what people's favorite archetypal relationship is. I've learned this stuff from Dr. Robert Moore, from a ton of his free lectures that he's got like hundreds of hours of them from the 70s. And I think he's from like, I don't actually remember where he's from, but he jokingly calls it shooting up with a particular archetype because that's how it acts. People get addicted to the way that a certain one feels, and then they're just hooked on it. It's hard to get them to open up and consider anything else, because when you're hooked on one, each archetype is like a whole universe, and it thinks that it sees the whole picture. So it's hard to tell someone that your whole picture is not the whole picture, because they're like, well, of course it is. So yeah, there's like, man, there's so much to explain, but go ahead and continue.
No, so from what I'm hearing, basically you're gonna kind of narrow down which archetype they are most attracted to at the moment, which one they're kind of living in, which one their life is orbiting around in some ways. And by gaining that understanding, they can branch out. They can be like, okay, so this is the universe that I've been seeing my world from. In another personal development space that I've been in, they call that kind of the lens. These are the glasses that I see the world out of. And in some ways, like, take off those glasses and you introduce them to other glasses they could put on, or a different lens that they can see the world out of. And when something like that shifts, our whole perspective in the world can shift, and what we see, like situations, they look differently. We can see different possibilities out of that one area just by shifting the lens. So in some ways, it sounds like you get them to understand what lens they're seeing the world out of and help them kind of play with shifting it and what might show up in that space.
Yes, that's huge. So what comes to mind for me with that is that with these four primary cornerstones, the stars, they each have their own gravity. And if you're not paying attention, you'll get sucked in. And however, having a good relationship with one of them, if you are looking, helps facilitate the relationship with the others. They're always complementary if you are open to considering that they're complementary. Like if you want to learn more, you're set. If you're closed off, then there's nothing that anyone can do to make you open up. And no, there was something on my mind that you just said about lenses.
Taking one lens off and a whole other world opens up when you have a different lens and a different perspective on life.
Dang, I don't know why that didn't ring. Bummer.
No worries. But yeah, that has been, at least for me in the personal development space, one of the most transformational things is the second you get what your lens is, the second you get so clearly and like in the present what you're seeing the world out of, it's that moment. It's like all in the present. It's that moment where something else is suddenly able to show up because you got the thing that you've been living in.
So the thing that has to work when it comes to discussing this with people and getting them to grow through it and in it, is you have to meet them where they're at. And if you as the host, okay, as the host, assuming you've got an interest in this stuff and you want to bring it to other people, you have to understand what each of these behave like so that you can see it in other people and see what juices them up. And then you relate to them on that level and you bring it up to them and they feel seen and they're like, oh my God, now this person understands me. And then they listen because they want to hear more about themselves. And to do that, of course, obviously, like I said, we have to know the way that those, not just how they behave, but how they feel, because each of them has a different feeling. I've got 4 different notebooks that I got from Walmart for that reason. These are my little sacred archetype books where I take notes of stuff. And when I have a realization about the way that it feels, I'll write it down. And then I'll go through those notes and I'll pick up what feels the most potent about that, and I'll write it again. And as I go through the book, it gets more dense and more feely. And you start to really pick up on that and get more sensitive to it because you felt how rich it can be. So to get there, you have to even know that this is worth doing in the first place. So to do it for yourself, it's either listening to, if you want to go through like the long, strenuous lectures, you could do that. That's fine. But there are books that were written in the 70s by Dr. Robert Moore and a close friend of his, Douglas Gillette, who is a mythologist and added to Robert Moore's studies on this stuff. Robert Moore was the psychoanalyst that cultivated all of this. So in their books, they've written King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And there was another psychoanalyst named Rod Boothroyd who expanded on that. And then because King, Warrior, Magician, Lover was taken, he just skipped to Warrior and then put King at the back. So it's Warrior, Magician, Lover, King. That book. That is the one that I would suggest to anyone who wants to start with this stuff. I don't believe there's an audiobook, so maybe there might be, but that's really what I did my podcast for, so I could kind of teach on that stuff.
And what is your podcast? If people were like, I don't want to do the audiobook, I don't want to do that, I just want you, and I want you to tell me.
Sure. So it's the Golden Path Podcast, but there's a whole bunch of those, so it's hard to kind of narrow that down. Mine has big golden letters, the Golden Path Podcast, with not polyhedral, but it's a 12-pointed star behind it in the same shade of gold on a black topographical.
I think I can put it in the description too. We can make that work.
Okay. And I have that in my link tree as well. When I share my link, I make sure it's my link tree. And then when people tap on the podcast, they can select their not hosting platform, but the listening one.
Yeah.
So
we went over it slightly, but like if someone, I know you're working with a coach and you're doing some coaching stuff as well. So people, like you said, the more we get to know each other, ourselves, not each other from that, but the more we get to know ourselves, the more powerful we can be in our business and the more powerful we can flow through our challenges. So if someone was to work with you, can you walk me through like exactly where you'd start, what they'd get, like what the progress is?
Sure. So yeah, I've partnered with another coach in the space who helps with spiritual realization and stuff like that. He also studied Hebrew mysticism, which is what really got me into that. He and I are working on fleshing out a platform and an offer, but we're also custom tailoring it to each person. So we have very broad steps and a progression through it, but because every person needs different things for their growth, we're not cementing too many details in stone. And we found that works really, really well for people. First would be starting with a survey that I created. It's got 21 questions right now. I'll probably add some, but it adds up to 100, and it's called the Archetypal Relationship Index. And it just gauges where you're at and what it is that, like, it kind of gives a score from 1 to 5 on each of these 20 different questions. The first question isn't scored, it's just a repeat thing. And this 1 to 5 each have different descriptions. So you'll read through each of these levels and say with wonder, like I'll give you the word wonder and each of the descriptions, the levels of relationship. You'll read each of them, and if you're torn between two of them, you just round down. But we survey you with that. We figure out what's your strongest and your weakest, and we help you leverage your strongest to develop the weakest, because the weakest is going to be a huge sore spot and blind spot for you. And all of the time, the weakest one is the one where it's going to be a huge, just shooting yourself in the foot. That's like when I first started reading Rod Boothroyd's book, Warrior, Magician, Lover, King, I was thinking, okay, I don't know much about this stuff. So I'm starting with the first chapter on the warrior, and I'm thinking, I don't have any of these traits. How valid is this? And they literally, it was like miraculous. It was very synchronistic. If we're talking Carl Jung talk, that I think the very next paragraph, it said, and if you don't have these traits and you think that we're being bogus, it's because you have a very poor relationship with it. And that's a blind spot. And you need to work on that because this is a part of you. And if you don't think it is, you're hurting. And I was like, wow, ouch, that's beautiful.
You're like, and they saw me. They included me in this. It hurts.
Great. After
And
that, what that?
it sounds like that's also kind of what got you hooked. You're like, okay, I have stuff to work on.
Yeah. And I've always been the kind of person who's like just creating things to work on. But it's a very self-development thing. I know here on our talk, I'm higher energy, but I'm very introverted. I just get very excited about this stuff, but I'm like always in a reflective, hesitate to take action state. So, but regarding our offer, after taking the archetypal relationship index, again, yeah, we'll walk you through, like, we'll discuss what it is that you even need and what you expect and what you want, and then just work with you on that. And it has been working pretty well. My coach, so I've not been very good at lead generation, so I've not had my private clients, but with my partner Hector and I together, we've been getting a lot of very cool results.
That's amazing. And what are the results? What are some of the success stories that you've had?
What are some of the what?
The success stories that you've had.
They've been kind of vague, and it's interesting to see that because when people are learning mindset type stuff, they're like, I just feel better. I can't put my finger on it. And it's like, how do we even if we were to record that and use it as a testimonial, which most of the time we don't because just for privacy, but how is that supposed to speak to people? Because yeah, they feel better, but when you're doing marketing and copywriting, you want it to be painfully piercing. Like you want to get in the wound and like twist it, and it doesn't do that because at this deep like identity being level, just everything illuminates, and it's hard to put your finger on. But people just feel better. And I hate just making it that vague, but that's the kind of responses that we get.
I really like that statement though. The everything illuminates. Like kind of like it's a very internal personal experience of you've taken glasses off, you have another set of glasses on, and it's like everything looks different. It's like everything looks brighter and you seem brighter. And I'm sure you've probably had a similar experience, but I know in some of the personal development spaces I've been in, watching people go through stuff, it is like it's like light is then shining from their face. And you don't know what shifted and you don't know what happened, but it's like suddenly everything's brighter. And you're like, I don't know what happened. You're the person leading it knew better, but it's like the clouds parted and suddenly there's this beam of sunshine coming out of them. And it seems like what the work that you're doing is just another path to get to the result.
The main copywriting, like the offer that we give people is in less than 90 days, we are going to help give you the clarity and energy to, and then we'll change the second half of that to being the parent and business owner, the fatherpreneur, the motherpreneur that you've been looking forward to and you haven't had the time to fulfill. Or I focus on the self-development obsessed business owners, men and women. My partner Hector tends to work with fatherpreneurs. So we're just working on both of that together. If they're women, they'll work with me. That's perfectly fine. I love it. If they're men, they'll work with both of us because it helps also give him more testimonials. It would be weird for him to get women's testimonials for his coaching when he's doing his private stuff, working with fathers. So that's just the way that we divided it.
Amazing. So business owners, anyone, especially like people who are development crazy, personal development nuts, those are the people. That's who should come to you.
Yes. So when it comes to the people that Hector and I are both partnering to work with, it's business owners or like executive professionals. I'm still a coach. I'm looking for clients. That's fine. Those can be anyone who is self-development obsessed. I also like to work with people who are in ministry, like ministry leaders, and psychoanalysts who are not yet full of themselves. That has been a huge problem because depth psychology and humility is not taught in psychology. Like when people go to university to study psychology, it's like a medical thing. I'm the doctor. You shut up. You take my advice. And they're full of themselves. They're totally inflated. I've not gotten very, very good results with psychoanalysts who have committed to this. And they want to be better people, but they're not open to actually where that comes from. And it's frustrating.
I love that though. You create the opening. That's what it's all is, creating the opening. That's your job. If you want an opening, Destin's the man to talk to.
Yep.
Okay. And then kind of the last piece is, where are you going from here? Like we've talked a bit about it, but I know that you were going to go away and have a think about like, what's your vision? Where are you going? What would you like to create?
That gets me more excited than anything ever. The best sources of this kind of emotional depth that I have gotten from any kind of content usually comes from anime movies. So specifically Studio Ghibli, and they're just works of art. They're tearjerkers. They're very cool. So they're very deep. They're magical. And my personal coaching practice is called Like Magic Coaching. I did that for that reason, because I want people to be just in the testimonials. I want them to, even if they were not to know my company, I want them to say, man, it was like magic. I don't understand it, but it worked. And where I want to take that is to the moon. I want to, like, the storytelling capacity is bigger than Disney. Disney doesn't even fully know that this is what they're doing. This is what they want to cultivate in people. Like they have a hunch because it's archetypal. It's the foundation. Everyone has access to it, but they don't have the model. They don't quite get it. And even if they were like Disney were to use consulting with this kind of framework, it's not going to be quite as deep as using them from the beginning and leveraging that purpose. I want to make a children's book. I want to have people who've been raised on this kind of insight from, they don't even remember how far back that goes. I want people who are like, wow, I don't remember where that started. I just kind of knew it. Yeah. That's where I want people to get with this stuff. I want it to be that natural. And for the parents who are reading these stories to their kids, I want it to be for them too. They don't have to know that.
I hear that. I totally hear that. In my world, I was a plumbing apprentice long ago, and my bestie and I are writing a children's book about women in the trades and a little girl kind of growing up. And that's kind of it, is there's all of these new ideas and these new ways of looking at things. And when you're a child, make it the norm. Like make it the norm to get to know yourself. Make it the norm to get to know the opportunities that are out there for you. And I love that. I love that we're going down to a lower age level and bringing that possibility to life.
Super simple too. On a super, part of what makes it so simple is, again, it's archetypal. We already get it. That's the programming we're born with. Everything else that we add on top doesn't make sense because this makes so much sense.
Right.
And the best example I have of just the counterintuitive proper way to do this is, I was watching the Disney cartoon movie Meet the Robinsons.
Yes.
And the main character, he's an adventurer. He's got this little peanut butter and jelly squirt gun that he's like shooting at people's bread on the dinner table in the future. And it malfunctions and explodes. It makes a huge mess. And everyone gets quiet, and he's like, I'm so sorry, guys, I made a mess. And the room erupts, and everyone says, you nailed. And just that was such a special moment, because that taught me, I had not, like, I didn't know that before. That the healthy way to approach failure is to celebrate it. Crazy. That's archetypal. And when we make sense of that, it's like, wow, the world would be a better place if we celebrated failure. As simple as that is. Like if like the kid is bringing the Thanksgiving turkey to the table and he drops it and everyone's giving him applause. He wouldn't forever remember that as the most traumatic moment of his life.
Yep. It would shift. It would shift an entire future. Well, as a note to end on, I think that's a fantastic one. And thank you very much for being on here, and we'll ferret some clients your way because, as you said, everyone needs this. And
Thank you for having me too. I
I think
appreciate you.
anytime. Appreciate you too.